So I've been in the corporate life for the past 7 years now. First 2 years as a management consultant based out of New York City, and the last 5 in a FAANG tech company holding roles across the sales and marketing teams. And in this video, I want to share 5 important lessons I learned from observing the high performers I've had the pleasure of working with that may benefit those of you in the first few years of your career. Let's just get started. First, I learned how to quickly build credibility with my colleagues even with zero working experience. And that is to always find ways to reduce friction for others. The idea is there are universal actions anyone can take in the workplace to make their colleagues' lives easier and as a byproduct, come off as more professional. For example, a very simple yet realistic scenario is when a teammate messages you to send them the documents that were presented during a team meeting. Instead of replying with links in the messaging app itself, take a few extra minutes, compose an email with the files attached, and include a brief description of those documents. This way, your colleague can review the email at their convenience and not have to dig through chat history at a later point in time. Or take another common situation. Your manager asks you to forward them an email that got lost in their inbox. Instead of going through the back and forth process of searching for it yourself, sending them the title, and asking if they found it, simply perform the search in your own Gmail inbox and send them that URL directly, solving their problem in one easy step. If you don't know how to do this, make sure to check out my video on Gmail tips and tricks. And I can go on with these examples, right? Include detailed agendas in your calendar invites. Send action-oriented follow-up emails after meetings. But the idea here is if you're able to make the lives of those you work with easier, they're gonna quickly see you as someone who's very reliable, someone who's able to take on more responsibility, even with relatively little industry experience. Second, I learned how to influence without authority. And as you can imagine, this is a very common pain point for professionals in the first few years of their careers, since there's a perception that without a senior title, you can't really tell others what to do. When I first joined the sales team in my current company, I learned the hard way that I didn't exactly have an equal relationship with the client, since my positioning is that of a salesperson selling a product. Compounding this issue was that I needed to convince internal teams to provide me with the resources to pitch the client, and they don't report to my manager or even my manager's manager. And then I came across this principle called constructive persuasion in an article by Harvard Business Review, and I realized a lot of my colleagues were applying this concept to exert influence without a senior title. Spoiler alert, constructive persuasion is just a fancy way of saying taking the initiative. But here's an example of how it works. Following a meeting, your manager delegates to you, the junior member, the task of getting the rest of the team to input the revenue projections. You can either A, do the bare minimum, open up a spreadsheet, and expect everyone else to fill it out on time because the manager said so, or B, create a structured table, make it look pretty by color coding it, and clearly mark who inputs what by when. You can also follow up individually, perhaps by linking them to their specific cell, and at that point, they would almost feel bad if they didn't help, because you already did 99% of the work. And this brings us to lesson number 3, which is visibility in the workplace does not equate to boasting about your achievements. For those of us with a few years of working experience, you've probably come across the terms visibility, presence, exposure. And these phrases are often associated with job promotions and salary raises. On one hand, it's a little naive to believe that hard work gets recognized automatically. On the other, it's simply untrue that broadcasting what you've done immediately means you get more exposure, because that often comes off as a bit arrogant and superficial. So the one thing I learned from my colleagues who consistently had strong presence is this. They would always make the time to share their knowledge and experience with the broader group. Sound counterintuitive? Here's an example. When I first joined the sales team as an account manager, I struggled with revenue pipeline management, so I signed up for internal training. In that 1-hour live session, I learned how to segment, prioritize, and organize my book of business, and I even received a spreadsheet template that I could use immediately. And when my manager asked me about my sudden improvement, I said, "Oh, Eric Henry from the Australia sales team, he held a workshop last week. It was amazing. I'm using his spreadsheet right now." And I'm sure I'm not the only one who gave him credit for teaching us new concepts, right? And just like that, he became more visible in front of the sales managers. A few months later, it was my turn to help onboard new hires. And I thought it would be more efficient if I compiled and distributed product knowledge in a Google Slides format. Those decks end up being featured in a monthly newsletter that was sent to all sales teams in the APAC region. So while hard work may not get recognized automatically by itself, good work rarely goes unnoticed by those you're trying to help. The fourth lesson I picked up is how to intelligently say no. So all my colleagues are extremely smart, very hardworking, hold themselves to high standards. But because of this, they often find themselves taking on more work than a healthy work-life balance would allow for, which is a very common phenomenon in the consulting, finance, and tech industries. At the same time, if handled incorrectly, rejecting a colleague or senior manager may damage your working relationship with them. And I found the colleagues who handled this dilemma well had a relatively simple solution. When you're already at maximum capacity and another request comes in, you want to first let them know how long your current tasks are going to take and that you're open to help when those are completed. Then, and this is the most important part, make sure to point them to another resource they can use in the meantime to solve their problem. Or as Austin Kleon puts it in his best-selling book, Keep Going, after you decline, offer them another form of support. This combination is genius because in the short term, you prove you have their best interests at heart by pointing them to an alternative solution. And in the long term, you're still open to help once your own priorities are taken care of. A workplace example could be if someone's asking you to pull data for them. Point them to a dashboard, let them know what filters to use so they could download it themselves. For me, I currently receive a lot of meeting requests from colleagues, friends, and strangers alike on how to start making video content. And since I work like 60 hours a week in my full-time job, it would be basically impossible for me to have all those chats. But I would take the time and organize the websites, links, and resources I use to get started and send that to them. 99% of the time, that would be exactly what they were looking for in the first place. And lesson number 5, network with an open mind. A bad habit I picked up in college is to assume networking automatically means having an agenda, a single purpose for every coffee chat. And the problem with this approach is that you become so focused on what you think you might want that you close yourself off to other, potentially better possibilities. I'm a prime example of this. When I was in the sales team, I thought I was going to be there for a while. I love the work, I hit my numbers, but it wasn't until I met a senior marketing manager in a team offsite that I even realized what product marketing actually meant. 2 months and 4 internal interviews later, I joined the marketing team, and now I like it even better than sales. And I'm not just saying that because my colleagues might be watching. All jokes aside, 2 concrete tips for networking. Number 1, make it a goal to have a coffee chat with someone outside of your core team once a week, or at least once every 2 weeks. Second, be genuinely curious about what they do. More often than not, even if it's not an area you actively want to move into, you might find there are collaboration opportunities between your teams that will benefit both your work. So that was a roundup of 5 important lessons I learned in the first few years of my career. I've been extremely fortunate to have great managers, mentors, and colleagues guiding me all this time. And I hope whether you're an intern or working professional, these lessons are beneficial to you in some shape or form. See you on the next video, and in the meantime, have a great one.